Hey everyone, it's me, Arthur Cade, welcoming the drop-dead gorgeous and awesome Beverly Johnson and her new book, The Face That Changed It All. One of the most iconic supermodels of all time tells her story. Make sure to check it out on bookstands everywhere. Incredible, incredible stuff. You're awesome. Check it out. Hey everyone, it's me, Arthur Cade, one of the original supermodels. You and I, Beverly Johnson, were just talking about how supermodeling isn't what it used to be. Is that even a verb? Supermodeling?
I'll take it.
You have this incredible new book out.
Thank you.
You are the face that changed it all. The first African-American woman on the cover of Vogue, one of the originals, one of the pioneers, and what a life. I mean, this book, you go through it and you realize how much you've packed into one life, and yet you're still young. It's incredible. Talk to me about it.
You're very kind. You're very kind. Yes, I did my memoirs. It's my childhood in the 70s and 80s. And I haven't even gotten to the 90s. I think that everybody's life is like this, but I guess I've had an extraordinary life, and particularly the 70s and 80s. It's a page turner. I kiss and do a little telling, but also I talk about the ride, the roller coaster ride I went on in the fashion industry, Halston, Andy Warhol, Elizabeth. I do a lot of name dropping, but in the sense of a story, because I was like the fly on the wall watching all of this take place.
When you look back, and when I think of the 70s, what was really the beginning of the supermodel age. You had Iman, which you talk about in the book, and the kind of convoluted rivalry that was being created. But it was really the beginning of the age of the supermodel. Talk to me when that age began and you were part of it. What was that ride like?
Well, it was absolutely amazing, because what happened was Vogue magazine started putting our names in the photographs, because people knew you were a model, but they didn't know your name. And so now people finally had a name to associate with the face. And that just took the whole modeling industry to another level. And we obviously raised our rates also.
We made some money. You're the first African-American woman on the cover of Vogue. You didn't even know you were going to be on the cover. That was one of the fascinating stories here. It's not like, hey, Beverly, get ready, your life's about to change. It was literally like, hey, I'm on the cover, and what the hell just happened?
Right, exactly. Because, when Wilhelmina told me I had the cover, I ran down there, I saw the cover. I was screaming. They had phone booths then. I called my mother Collect. You guys don't know about those things. But anyways, and we're screaming on the phone. My mother didn't know why she was screaming, because she didn't know what a big deal it was. And then when I found out I was the first woman of color on the cover and what that meant, I was like, whoa, that's heavy. I thought I was going to go out and start partying. And it was just this huge responsibility that I decided that I was going to really, take on and try to, do the best I can in that position. Because, it's just like, the world is turning and then it stops. And now that moment in history is my time. And it's like, holy crap,
I love your story with Eileen Ford, by the way, how she literally hazed you and made you find your own way home from. I don't think that could ever happen. Now supermodels are riding private jets home. She's like, figure out hitchhike.
She was an amazing woman. I just finished reading her book, Model Woman, by Robert Lacey, and I really understand her a lot more. She wasn't only that way with me, she was that way with everyone. She was the most powerful woman that I've ever seen. She could shut Ford down because she wouldn't send them any more models for the cars. She had and she yielded it. And so, she was just really an amazing, so she taught me some tough lessons, but I was a quick learner.
You talk about kiss and telling, and obviously the Arthur Ashe story. You've dated some pretty.
Can you imagine?
The funny thing is, Arthur Ashe, he thought you were a partier, too much of a partier. It was crazy.
Right?
When you look at New York during that time, I feel like the socialite era was so different back then than it is now. Because of the internet now on Page 6, everyone knows everything. Back then, it feels like it was more of a secret society, right?
Absolutely. We were operated in a bubble, and it was a closed society. And they literally wouldn't let anyone in. And I'm not going to tell too much about the book, but they finally let me in, because before they said, she's probably going back home to Brooklyn to make dinner for her husband and everything. I said, yeah, Andy, that's exactly where I'm going. And then all of a sudden, I think when they found out that I was, indulging the same way they were indulging, they said, oh, she's cool, and so they kind of like, took me in. But anyways, it was a really fascinating era. I talk about, Studio 54, which I only visited once.
What I would have given to have been during that time and
Yes.
been able to visit. There's nothing like that today.
Oh my God, there's nothing like it. I mean, there's real, because it was a very elitist, where we felt comfortable. Can you imagine me around Elizabeth Taylor? Could you imagine?
I can't imagine being around Elizabeth Taylor.
In her glory. The most beautiful. I was like, and so there were a lot of moments when I was like that. But anyways, I just think that people are really fascinated by that era, and now I see why, and I lived it.
So it's fascinating. You become this enormous supermodel, and you start wanting to diversify your career. You want to do acting. You want to do it all. Talk to me about changing gears and pursuing, the building of the brand that was Beverly Johnson.
So what happened was Eileen Ford, one of the lessons was, she's told me 99.9% of the models leave the business broke. Don't be one of them. Like, holy crap, And so then it was like a 4 or 5 year career. It's like almost like an athlete, you're in and you're out. So I was trying to figure out how I'm going to stay around, because the money kept getting better and better. So you have to reinvent yourself a lot. And so basically, after a while, you really know that you're going to have to transition. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do, because I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't want to do any of this. I'm not a fashion person, so I was introduced to the arts. So then I realized that, well, I don't know what to do, so I'll do it all. I was author. I even had to, I can't even tell you.
No, you have to tell me now.
I had the nerve to sing. Oh my God. You read about it in the book. Oh, I could run everybody out of this room if I started singing. But you try everything. And so then that's what happened.
When you look back and you look at today's supermodel, I look at your era and I feel like it was more pronounced. I don't want to say elegant, because today's supermodels are gorgeous and elegant, but there was a certain ambiance, a certain mystique around the supermodel back then, because there were so few of you guys. And then you had the next era usher in the Cindy Crawfords and the Christy Turlingtons. Naomi Campbell. When you look at today's supermodel, what are your thoughts about that versus your era?
Well, I think that, every era has their distinct traits. And I personally feel that Naomi Campbell has the most significant body of work, probably of any model of this century. So what I really am looking forward to today's model is seeing their body of work, because, Lauren Hutton had, we had, Jean Shrimpton, if you want to even go before that, Twiggy, and, because I'm a student of Verushka, I'm a student of the 60s era and the 70s era. And then, we have Rene Russo and I, and, it's just that we really felt it was an art form, and I'm sure today's girls do too. And Linda Evangelista, she was like a chameleon.
It was incredible.
She just brilliant. And I'm sure eventually, and Kate Moss, and so I'm sure eventually we're going to, one of those kind of models are going to rise out of this bunch. What's great is that we're kicking the other girls, the celebrities and so on, off the covers, and we're getting back to the model. The designers are probably like going, oh, praise the Lord, because, they have to dress these little actresses, and it's no fun for them. So we're really getting back to putting the models on the pages in the magazines, but also we know their name because they have 12 million Instagrams.
Isn't that insane?
Followers.
Can you imagine if you guys, when you look at social media, what would your life have been if you had social media back then? Like, I would be terrified, because you're right. If you were partying, you were at Studio 54. Drugs, like you talk about the drug issues in here. How could you have functioned with social media back then? It would have been tough.
Well, yeah, it would have been, I think it would have just, it would destroy the whole mystique. I think even of the actors in those days, all the mystery behind, the actors and the studios, they kept everything, silent. And, I don't know I don't think it would have had, that kind of high, because people actually recognized me on the streets of New York when I was a model, oh, the model, oh, Beverly Johnson. I don't think it would have had that kind of celebrity if that were the case today. Because now, the more you know a person, and that's another reason why I wanted to do the book. It was so interesting. I was doing it. Oh, I know your story. No, you don't. No, I know your story, but you don't know my story. But if this had been all over the internet and the world in the 70s and 80s, yeah, you would have known my story. But you don't know my story. So that part is interesting. That you really do kind of get to know the girls because of Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And I tweet. That's how I connect with them. The Joan Smalls and the Chanel Iman.
The new generation.
The new generation, and they ask me little questions, and it's really kind of nice, actually.
It blows my mind when I read about, and we're still, what's incredible is you read about topics, the stuff that you were dealing with, equal pay back then. This is probably still stuff, whether it's in the modeling world, in the real world, that people are dealing with today. Talk to me about, because being an African-American model back then, what was it like? You talk about the difficulties. It was pretty tough.
Yeah, it was. Well, we had just come out of the 60s. And believe it or not, there were more black models in the 70s than there are today.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So there's something to be said about we need a inclusion and a diversity contract somewhere in the modeling industry. When I finally got that model that would tell me what she was making, and then I found out I was making half of what she was making, and I was doing, more work than she was on a particular photo shoot. She stood up for me too. She said, "That's not fair. I can't believe they would do that." And I really just basically went into the agency and just, point blank said, but I had enough leverage at that time because I was literally one of the top models in the world. So I had the leverage at that time. But so for a long time, I had to be quiet until I had the leverage. There were a lot of things going on in the industry. We go to, places in England on the rolling countryside, and they wouldn't do the shoot because I was a black model because I was black. And I was like, we're out here in the middle of freaking nowhere. Are they kidding me? But on the magazines were very protective of me when they would run into those kind of situations, because I would be one of the only blacks. I was the Sammy Davis Jr. of the modeling world. I was the token.
What a metaphor.
Yeah.
So one of the things, obviously, everybody's going to be talking to you about this. It's a chapter in the book called Mr. Cosby. And I remember this year when your Vanity Fair piece came out, and I thought to myself, this is one of the bravest, best written, most honest first-person pieces that I've read in I don't know how long. Talk to me about writing that piece, putting that in this book, because it's moving, and now we're seeing what this monster did, and it's pretty moving stuff.
Well, what happened was I started my memoirs in 2013. And I said to myself, if I'm going to do my memoirs, I'm really going to tell my story. And one of those stories was the encounter with Cosby, being drugged by him. And I tell my story, and we hand the chapter in, and the editor says, we can't put that in the book. There's a lot of legal liability here. And I'm not surprised, but I said, okay. Well, at least I finally told someone my story. And then when Barbara Bowen and all these other very courageous women came out and were speaking, and I saw them being re-victimized and just treated so horribly in the press, I couldn't stand it. I didn't want to say anything because, Black Lives Matter, and I know that, but, this is a whole different situation. And I had to do something, and so I did the Vanity Fair piece, and then all of the, I didn't know it was going to be do what it did, actually, because I wasn't raped.
It went viral.
I mean,
it went viral.
it was the next morning. I did that at midnight. The next morning, there was NBC, ABC, CBS at my door with those big, huge trucks that were going to beam it up to Scotty or whoever you guys do it to. I mean, it was like, what did I do here? But I felt my conscience, and and my principles, and these women, and I knew they were telling the truth, and so. But what's really wonderful is, after all that came out, my editor came back and said, about that Cosby chapter, we like to put that in the book. And that's just indicative of what's been happening. We've been trying to tell our stories, but nobody wanted it or would listen.
When you look at the environment of Hollywood, people don't understand there is so much that goes on behind the scenes, hence the nickname Holly Weird. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes. Here you are, this incredibly powerful, well-known supermodel, and still dealing with these types of situations that no-name actresses trying to break into the business are going through. When that was all happening, did it seem almost, hey, this is normal, this is what goes on in the business, or did you realize there's something really wrong here?
Well, what I realized is that how prevalent it was, not only in Hollywood, but in every walk of life. You would be hard to come by a woman that has not been sexually harassed, molested, or sexually assaulted. We're talking about from the Fortune 500 companies on down. Yeah. And what's happened from this whole Cosby debacle is that we are now having that conversation about the rape culture, because it's serious. And we're moving the needle. It's not going to move a lot, but we're finally moving the needle on violence on women, and so for that I'm really happy and proud, and proud to be a part of this movement, because it's in every walk of life. It's just not in Hollywood. People think it's just in Hollywood. It's so prevalent. It's scary.
Did you hear Damon Wayans' comments over the weekend? He just made comments which really mind-boggling, especially he's an intelligent guy, and he came out and made a comment almost defending Bill Cosby, saying some of these women are unrapeable. When you hear something like that, it almost goes against what you're saying. What we need to be acknowledging this, not being derogatory towards it.
Well, that's what's great about America. Everyone can have their opinion and state their opinion, and that's his opinion. And but I think that for myself, I'm not angry or bitter. I don't want anything from anyone, and I forgive him. Because that's the only way you can move on and move forward. And I just think that it's so wonderful to see these women finally being able to begin the healing process, because now they're being heard, they told their story, and now they can move on. Because rape is a traumatic, I can imagine. If I had been raped, maybe I wouldn't be sitting here today.
It's incredible.
That's how it would change my life.
So what's next for you? On a lighter note, you've got you look gorgeous still, and what's next for you?
Thank you. So what's next?
Yeah, you don't age, by the way. I can't even describe. I'm sitting here and I'm like, holy cow, this woman is drop dead gorgeous.
Thank you. That's very kind. But they're talking about a mini series for the book, and so I'm going to be involved in that. I'm a businesswoman. I have a line of hair extension and makeup and handbags, and business is really wonderful. And then it's possibly another show. I had a show on the Oprah Winfrey Network, Beverly's Full House. So we're going to do something else on another network, a little bit more fun. And life is good. 3 grandchildren later, 4 and a 2 and a 1-year-old. My life is full.
Beverly, you're an extraordinary woman. Everybody's got to check out her new book. Really, when you talk about packing one life into essentially half a life so far, this is an extraordinary tale. So the face that changed it all, yes, you are. Congratulations, Beverly Johnson.
Thank you so much.